Hi, this is Janelle Orsi of Sustainable Economies Law Center, and I wanted to talk through our new resource called Seeds of Land Return. This is inspired by about 6 years or so of working with Black and Indigenous led and other POC led land stewardship organizations and like land trusts and real estate cooperatives. And often we've been involved when somebody feels inspired to either give or sell at low cost land to such groups. But I've also found that it can become very complicated, often unnecessarily. Like people get really bogged down in the legal details. Lawyers and realtors get involved, and sometimes the professionals make it more complex than it needs to be. And that can foster nervousness, anxiety, distrust among the parties, when really we want to support the spirit of love and generosity and justice that motivates land return. So I want to just talk through this because I think it's easier sometimes for people to get a tour of a new resource. That said, we've tried to make this resource short. As you can see, it's only 19 slides, and trying to just keep it something that somebody could read maybe once and then maybe come back and read one more time and then walk away feeling like, oh, okay, they've learned something and understand it. So we just want to make land return a lot simpler. And that's what this is for. You could also read a little more context on what shaped the design of this set of tools. They're very simple. They're designed to keep people's hearts and minds engaged, because even as lawyers, well, for me anyways, sometimes I look at a really long, wordy legal document and my brain shuts down. It's like the fear comes up of not understanding everything that's in it, and then my brain shuts down and it's hard to engage. So we try to keep things simple to keep our minds engaged and also our hearts engaged, to remember why we're here. So some of the sample legal documents in this toolkit are going to include graphics and other things to set the tone. So a couple things to know about the toolkit is that in the notes below each slide, or many of the slides, are more resources and some background notes that you could review if you want to go deeper. And we wrote this both for the people who want to return land and for the organizations that are being set up to receive it. Although sometimes anywhere in this guide where we use the word you, well, except for here, we want everyone's feedback. But otherwise, when we say you in this guide, we are often referring to the owners of land who want to give it back. So this is to help the owners decide what tools they want to use, legal tools. So there's just a few background slides 2, 3, 4, that kind of set the tone. And there's a brief explanation about why seeds. And so seeds are teeny tiny little things. They're very simple, but they hold the genetic blueprint of something that can be vastly diverse and alive. And so legal documents can be similar if we create really minimalist basic documents that provide what is necessary to return land, but not going into all of the complex details that you often find in legal documents. The reason you find that in legal documents is that people sometimes, or often, they try to think of everything that could possibly happen in the future and write out a procedure for how that's going to be dealt with. But with these seeds, we want to support people to actually not try to figure all of that out, but instead maintain good relationships so that when circumstances change in the future, that people can work through things together and preferably avoid the court system, because the court system ultimately relies on policing to take land back, and that's just not the system that I think most people want to be using if reparations and repair are the spirit that are bringing people here. So that's the background on why we call them seeds. And slide 5 is where this is sort of like the dashboard for the whole toolkit, because we've organized the tools into 3 triads, and these are little seed packets right here. The 3 triads are tools or seeds that you can use to share space. So while a landowner still owns the land, they can still share the space with a land stewardship group using these tools. There's also tools to arrange for future title transfer. So somebody owns the land now, but they know that later they're going to want to transfer it to, say, a land trust. These are different approaches. And then there's also the tools you would use if you're ready to go ahead and transfer title. So each of the seed packets links to a slide in the presentation. And let's go ahead and click on this first one. So the next 3 I'm going to talk through are ways to share access to land, share the space. And the first one we're calling land access agreement is, I'm going to go ahead and click so you can see that each of these slides links to a sample document. And I'll also share, this is the folder that anchors this entire project. So in this folder, we have all the drafts where we collect our feedback and then and kind of work behind the scenes, but then we make the public editions available for anyone who clicks on it. So there's going to be a lot of resources linked to from this guide. And yeah, what else to say about that? Yeah, so I'm going to open several of them. So a land access agreement is something that gives people the ability to come onto land, but it's not usually to give people exclusive use of a particular area. If the use of an area is exclusive, that's generally referred to as a lease. And if it's intended to be permanent access, that's often referred to as an easement. And there's some gray areas between these kinds of definitions. But a land access agreement, you could call it other things like a sharing agreement. And what it's actually usually called under the law is a license. That's what distinguishes it from a lease and an easement. People call it a license. I find the use of the word license a little confusing to people, so I'm calling it this. So yeah, you click on this land access agreement, and here's an example of a seed. It's a very simple slideshow, 7 slides, that outlines the topics you would want to cover if you're going to be sharing your land with an organization. Just the who, what, where, when, how kind of details. And then the idea is people will come and flesh this out together, preferably collaboratively, because you want to set the tone for a collaborative relationship by making the agreement together. So that's the first seed. The second seed is leases. So again, where you have exclusive use of a space. And we made the seed of a residential lease. Residential leases are governed oftentimes by local and state laws that are largely about protecting tenants, although cynically people would say they're about protecting landlords. But there are often requirements as to what needs to go into a residential lease. So we included that, and this was created for Oakland, but all of the details about hazards, bed bugs, etc. So, but otherwise, like the land access agreement, this is another very simple agreement that just sort of walks through, okay, why did we come together, and for how long can the group use this house? Oh, this particular one anticipates that the organization is going to be leasing an entire house, but then can in turn maybe lease it to individuals. So it makes the organization like the master tenant. But yeah, there's slides where you can sort out details about who uses what spaces, how utilities and other things are handled. So that's a basic lease template there. Going back to this, I didn't create a sample land lease only because the land access agreement could just be expanded upon and turned into a land lease with a little more detail added to it. But oh, by the way, you'll see under a lot of these slides are to-do lists, and I'm about to take a 6-month sabbatical, but when I come back in April of 2023, I might continue to expand on the resources. But in the meantime, my coworkers at Sustainable Economies Law Center might continue to build on it. only because we have so many clients who've been asking us for resources like this for so long. So the third set of tools is easements that are intended to give permanent access or permanent stewardship rights or permanent ability to enforce against ecological destruction. So people know about conservation easements, many people do, where oftentimes land trusts are given the ability to prevent natural spaces from being destroyed or developed. We've created a couple of really unique easements, including one called a housing justice easement for the purpose of preserving affordability of housing. And then another easement, sometimes we call it kinship conservation easement. We might actually update this and replace it with something called a rematriation easement to return land to indigenous stewardship. I'll go ahead and click on this one. So again, slide documents. The thing I love about slides is, well, it's easy to include graphics, which sets a nice tone. It's also easy to include lots of notes without cluttering up the document. And it also encourages people to be concise. If you can't fit everything onto one slide, you rethink what you're putting on there. So yeah, come back and enjoy this easement. We're excited to see more easements all over the place, because easements, I like to say, they ease the boundaries of private property, the solid boundaries of private property, which are really a social construct. But giving people access and stewardship is a really powerful thing to help restore community stewardship of land. So as you'll see, we just went through the first 3 seed packets. We'll go into the second set, which is about arranging for future title transfer of land. So let's say you own land and you want to someday sell it, hopefully for a low cost, to a land trust. You can enter into an agreement there's a few approaches to this. One is you can use this sample document. This sample document was my attempt to combine 2 types of documents, one called a purchase option and another called a right of first refusal. And the difference between those 2 things is really who decides when the purchase is going to happen and when. So generally, a right of first refusal means that when the owner's ready to sell, the organization or the land trust is going to have the opportunity to purchase it. But it's not until the owner is ready to sell. A purchase option, by contrast, is when the organization is ready to buy it. So it just sort of holds in place their ability to buy it, often while they're getting ready to, getting the funds ready. So I've combined those 2 types of documents into one, use a checkbox approach. And I'm sure there's a lot of room for improvement on this document. You'll see some notes below the slides about what could be added, but I think you'll get the basic idea about what these are about. And there's a slide about purchase price. Are you going to determine the price in advance, or are you going to have a formula for figuring it out later, and so on. So yeah, take a look at this. This is another thing that I hope organizations will use more, because so often a land trust learns of a property that's going up for sale, and it's rare for a nonprofit or cooperative to be able to scramble and get the money together soon enough to purchase it. So this really helps kind of create a channel of land toward the land stewardship organizations if they're able to collect a lot of purchase rights. I also created a sample right of first offer, which is less powerful from the organization's perspective, but at the very least what it means is that if somebody's going to sell their land, they're going to come and offer it to that organization first, before they even put it on the market. So that way, before that time clock starts ticking, or some houses sell within hours of going on the market. So before that, those wheels are even in motion. This sets a timeline where the owner is going to offer it to the organization, on certain terms. The organization can respond and accept those, or there could be further negotiation. So it's just kind of it's an obligation to negotiate in good faith. Yeah, so that's purchase rights. Life estates. I ended up creating a lot of resources on life estates below the slide, just because it's actually something I've never done myself. It's so often that people use their estate plans to transfer land after death. But what I love about estate or life estates is you actually execute a deed that really goes ahead and transfers an interest in the land to an organization. So it means the owner will be able to, they basically hold possession of the land for their entire lives, but after they die, it automatically goes to the organization and it's irrevocable. So that's what makes it powerful. You execute a life estate deed, and that really locks in that the land is going to go to the stewardship organization down the road. It's more powerful than most estate planning tools because so many estate planning tools are revocable. So and it's also, as you can see, it's basically a one-page thing. Very simple to do. All right, so estate gifts, that's kind of an umbrella term for 3 different things. Wills, living trusts, and transfer on death deeds. I created a sample will. It's really, really simple. It's what I believe includes the bare minimum that someone would need to have a legally enforceable will. And you could check this out. The reality is 67% of people die without a will or trust. And so I actually feel like this is better than having nothing at all. And honestly, having done work in estate planning attorneys' offices before, I actually think there's a lot of stuff in there that just doesn't need to be in there, these legal documents. So yeah, use a simple will at your own risk, but there it is. Don't want there to be any barriers to people bequeathing their land to return to Black and Indigenous people. So if the simple will can help people, that's wonderful. We've been working on some simple trusts. Again, the simple trust won't be as short as the simple will, but it'll be pretty darn short. It's a very simple concept, this idea of creating a living trust. And the benefit of it is that you don't need a court to oversee the distribution of assets. And so it means that land can transfer more quickly after somebody's death. So yeah, we will probably create a simple trust. We just weren't ready to share it. And then a transfer on death deed. There's actually a form that the state of California provides for this. It's a bit like the life estate, but the main difference is it's revocable. But still pretty powerful to go ahead and powerful and fairly simple to execute one of these deeds so that when you die, your house does automatically transfer. And automatically, there's a couple other little hoops that need to be jumped through, but including notice to heirs and beneficiaries. But yeah, so that's the estate planning, estate gift section. So we've gone through now 2 of the triads. Let's now talk about transferring title now. So the first is by a gift, just giving your land. It should be pretty simple. And in fact, we wrote a simple gift agreement. You don't even really need one, but it's really good to document people's intentions and to have a little clear understanding about what's going to happen, what needs to happen to make the gift complete. Sharing some of the gift giver's motivations is often helpful and helps to reinforce that they did it without any undue pressure and so on. So there's a simple gift agreement, and transferring land always brings up legal requirements from the state, from different taxing authorities. And so we've tried to make that fairly simple for people to go through. And in fact, all these other resources and forms that are listed here are the same ones on the next slide. So I'm going to talk about them there, which is simple sale. So simple sale is just the phrase we're using for somebody wanting to sell their land to a land trust, and let's say they want to do it for really cheap. They'd rather not go get lawyers and realtors and escrow and title companies and all of the professionals that make it really complicated. If you just want to sell land cheaply to an organization, basically this was a big project that we went through and tried to figure out what is the bare minimum that needs to happen. It was surprisingly hard to figure this out because realtors have really come to dominate this process. Even the lawyers' practice guides don't give you thorough enough information because it's become increasingly rare, I guess, for lawyers to handle sales. So the realtors, man, they own everything. But yeah, let's say you want to do it simply without all the professionals. We created a simple sale agreement. Very simple. And yeah, you can come back and read that. So that's just one of the first steps is saying, all right, we're gonna sell this land, you're gonna buy it, and here's what we're each gonna do. And then here are the parts that are legally required. So generally, when you sell land, and sometimes when you transfer it as a gift, there are disclosures that you have to provide. And okay, this is a long document. Let's see, it's 19 pages. It's unfortunate that it's so long, but what we did was go through California law and try to figure out what are all the legally required disclosures. They're spread about the California law all over the place. And in fact, if you want to know how we compiled this is kind of a messy notes doc on where we even got all this information, and we even copied and pasted the law in here and marked it up. So yeah, long story short, this may not be 100% thorough, but it includes almost all, if not all, of the disclosures that are legally required under California law. And this is something the seller needs to provide the buyer, so the buyer has all the information they need about the house before they commit to buying it. And there's not a lot of risk to the buyer if they don't get these disclosures. There's more risk to the seller, especially if there's problems with the property that weren't communicated. But we put this together so that basically a seller can go through here and just provide all kinds of information about the property. So yeah, you'll enjoy going through this. You'll learn a lot about what the law considers important and hazardous and all of that. Yeah, disclosures. And you don't have to file the disclosures with any agency. It's just simply that the seller provides it to the buyer. We created a sample deed right there. And all of this is for California, and California law has some exemptions to transfer taxes, but generally on the face of the deed itself, you indicate the transfer taxes that'll be paid. So that's the deed. And then there's 3 agencies that want you to file or obtain tax forms. One is the county assessor, wants to know more about what prompted the transfer, so they know whether and how to reassess the property. So that's a fairly simple form. Form 593 is a tax form that does, in the case when there's money changing hands, sometimes the buyer is going to actually need to withhold some of the payment to the seller and send it to the state of California. And this is so often handled by escrow companies that we realized it would be helpful to just kind of create an everyday person's guide to using this form, which we did. It's kind of drafty, but we're sharing it anyways. It really walks through step by step how to use that form. So that's state taxes. And then there's actually not a federal tax form to file, but you do need to get the seller to certify that they are a non-foreign person. Because if they were a foreign person, or yeah, if they were, then there might be a requirement to withhold taxes. And if there were that requirement, there would be other IRS forms to file. Okay, so those are the tax forms. And by the way, we've created a little guide that walks you through the steps to transferring real estate without professionals. We're trying to spice up our guides with wacky videos more. And then a volunteer also created a pretty thorough slideshow that walks through what normally happens in the process of a land transfer, because if you read through this, you may decide, oh, maybe you do want escrow, or maybe you do want title insurance. So that's just to help you understand what path you might want to take. But this was our attempt to keep it as simple as possible, and we actually feel very proud to have worked on that. The last thing is, let's say you give land or you sell land, but you want to retain some kind of relationship to it. We created some sample language for that would be included in the sale agreement or the gift agreement. So let's say you hand over title to an organization, but you want to live, say, in the back cottage of the property for the rest of your life or for another 10 years. You can write some language into the agreement for that. You could simply write some language in that says you have the ability to still come visit and enjoy the plants and animals or something. Or maybe you want to retain income, like if the organization is going to be leasing it out and getting income from it, maybe for a period of time you want a percentage or a portion of that income. And the reason this comes up is there are elderly people who feel very moved by land return and want to make it happen, but worry that they won't have the resources they need to support themselves. So this is an approach you could take. And there may also be, sort of on the to-do list, some of these things. If you want to retain a legal relationship to the land, sometimes you want to record something in the county records that makes future buyers aware of that retained relationship. So that's a sample that we can come add later. So the last 5 slides here have a lot of words. But yeah, just read through them, just some tips for how to use the seeds. And then we gathered input from land stewardship organizations about what they hope people will do and consider before giving land back or selling land. And then we have a couple slides about laws, because you could think about your situation and how you want to give land back and come up with a perfect arrangement, but then find out that there's a property tax consideration, let's say, that could throw a wrench in the whole plan. So we talk about the most common legal barriers to what people want to do. And in California has a particular kind of property tax system that means when land transfers, the property taxes can go from very low to extremely high. And so that's sometimes a reason to hold back on transferring title. So yeah, you can read through some of the information about legal constraints. Mortgages, outstanding mortgages on the land will generally prevent you from doing anything too creative in transferring land rights. And income tax incentives, we actually decided to not go into a lot of detail here because sometimes people become overly focused on the tax incentives and it ends up really constraining what can happen with the land. So, and plus it's like most of the time that people are seeking tax incentives is because they have enough income that they want to reduce their income taxes. And those folks often have tax people who could advise on this. So we decided not to go into detail. The very last slide is tools not included in the toolkit. There were a few that, they could have had their own slides, although if they did, it would have messed up our 3 triads up here. But these are also tools that I've used or at least 3 out of 4 of these, and I have started to question, just personally, how beneficial it is to use them in a land return context. So you can read a little bit more about at least my personal choice to exclude these, but other lawyers and activists in the realm of land back might have different thoughts about when these tools are useful. So that was your half-hour tour of Seeds of Land Return. Thank you.